You got fresh hair. Why we got a do-rag? After all this we done been through?
I know.
We can't even see your hair?
You got to remember, like, I make dinner in my house every night, so that's why I was rushing around.
What did you about to say, Janessa?
No, this last episodes of Suits, I was watching the guy say boom shakalaka, and I chuckled.
It's gonna come full circle. We gonna turn into Suits.
That's Kelly little prophecy.
Back on the Suits.
Full circle. That was a Janessa Jewel.
That's all y'all got.
Jim, Jewel. Which one is it?
No. All right, I'm ready.
Boom shakalaka.
Top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world.
I still have absolutely no idea what she's saying.
You do. Top of the world.
That is not what she's saying.
No, she's definitely not saying top of the I think she's saying an inch above the world.
That sounds. I can go with that.
Yeah,
I can go with that.
We live in an inch above the world. But
I can go with that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, so
it doesn't make any sense, but what art
that's
does.
what it sounds like.
Yeah,
the top of the world definitely makes sense. Plus, especially because that's the name of the song that I bought. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Worst Ones Podcast. This is the podcast for preachers' kids who live an inch above the world.
Or maybe it's above the world. I don't know.
Yeah, it's none of those.
I think it is. It's above.
It's above the world makes just as much sense.
Yeah, it's
top of the world makes no sense whatsoever.
That's not what it sounds like.
There ain't no T's in that. I know I'm Terry. I know where my T's at.
So this is the safe place for preachers' kids. My name is Rudy Wilson. I'm a PK. Terry Weezy's in the building. He's a PK. Kellie Leezy's in the building. She's a PK. And of course, we have our honor roll student, Janessa Rowland.
We tied roll today.
Yeah, we don't claim that. All right, you gonna make it.
No, it's Dean's list anyway. It doesn't even matter.
Okay,
because we adults.
So, some of these dead horses we should just stop beating. I think. I think the Dean's
when we stop with the honor roll
in the inch of the world, I think. We beat it enough.
Inch above the world.
Jesus Christ. All right. So Kelly, how you doing?
I'm good. So had my first kickball game today. But the other team forfeited.
There you go.
So we gotta win.
But you didn't have a game. If they forfeited, you didn't have a game.
Correct. But I gotta win.
There can only be one winner.
I mean, that's fine, but you didn't have a game. You just got to win.
Right. I agree. I don't disagree.
So you didn't even get to play. That's no fun.
I did not get to play. And I was very excited. I got my jersey. Oh, y'all can't see it. I got my jersey on with my name on the back and everything, and I didn't get a chance to play.
Did you buy cleats for this?
I did not.
You should get cleats. It'll keep you from getting hurt.
We got to wear like those little rubber ones.
Well, that's what I have. I have like football cleats or baseball cleats. Something, because when you're running around on the grass and the dirt, like you can really easily hurt yourself. So
I'll look into it for the next game. Maybe that's why we just the game today.
Go on Amazon like I did. You get like a cheap $20 pair. It'll save you.
$20 sounds good to me. All right.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
When I signed up for kickball, I never played because I broke my toe shortly during the practice thing. I bought cleats, but I never wore them. So they're sitting in my closet like 2 years later. I can't really tell you, Kelly, but I bought them for kickball.
All right, I guess I'll buy them. That's why I didn't play today, because I needed this conversation right here.
Well, I didn't wear them my first time, and it was fine. But it was like 4 games later, I ended up tearing both my quadriceps.
Oh, absolutely not.
And it was no fun for about 6 weeks.
Absolutely not. All right, I'm looking right now. Oh, here goes for $4.
There you go. Easy peasy.
I think I got mine from Dick's.
Pause.
Dick's Sporting Goods.
All right. Well, tired honor roll student, how you feeling?
Not good today. I'm having extreme back pain. I have my little heat pad on, so if I look like I'm sitting like this, it's because it's the only comfortable thing.
Gotcha.
Well, plus you on drugs.
I am
down at the. You're on what?
some meds, so I might just be like this too.
Good. I remember the time I was sick, I want to go lay down on the couch in the dark.
First of
The meds hit me.
all, you ain't finna blame it on the meds. You just went and laid your ass down in the bed
in the middle of
and just didn't care. You wasn't on a Tylenol or nothing.
I was sick.
Well,
the dedication.
You was just
don't know nothing else. The dedication to us showing up tired, sick, stressed, depressed.
That's why your camera be freezing while you talking right now. You getting stuck like that.
We got 3 years of content and 3 followers.
Say it again, Kelly.
One of us is lying. One of us is all hopped up on drugs.
All right. Well, Terry Weezy, what's up with you?
What is up with me? I don't know. There's a festival in this little town I live in on Saturday, so I'm going to go to that with my family. It's like a Oktoberfest kind of thing. So it's a good thing we weren't going to be recording on Sunday, because that'd have been probably going to be a little worse for wear on Sunday. You know, a lot of beer flowing at these Oktoberfests. I don't know if you've ever been to them, but like in Germany, when I used to stay over there, they have the beer steins. You ever seen that? Like a big giant glass mug. That's a liter. It's a liter of beer. And that's what they give you. And that's per serving. And some of these people go out there and have like 4 or 5 of those. That's like a gallon. It's drinking a gallon of beer. Yeah. So I'm gonna try to stay away from the sin.
There you go.
So.
Okay. That's what's up. Let's get into the topic, shall we? Let's talk about sex, baby. The question specifically from our producer. Terry's cutting in and out on this here.
And am I still freezing?
Not right now, no. Okay. Where was it at? So the question was, why is sex taboo in the church house? Okay. Other than premarital sex being a sin, why is it not talked about at church for married couples, in parentheses? Not just sex, but other sexual or reproductive topics, hormones, sexual conduct, aka consensual behavior, sex education, etc.
Because it's icky and it makes people feel weird. That's why. Going right back to that puritanical stuff again.
Same thing with what are other taboo topics? Money, politics.
They don't talk about taking a dump in the church either, because nobody wants to hear about it.
That's not necessary.
It's the same biological function.
But right, I think for me, to her point, it was talked about. It was premarital sex is wrong, and is a sin. Period. Now I've never been married, so I've never been in the marriage ministry. So I don't know if in those spaces they're more comfortable talking about sex and sexual acts and those things. So that may be a different avenue where they may not deliver the message to the entire church, but to this population of people. So that's a possibility. I do think that youth ministry, especially as I've been an adult, I think I've seen the topic talked about in like separate settings. So like for young girls. So we used to have a group for young girls, and we did have like a workshop on sex. And it came from a biblical perspective, but then also some real pieces as well. And they had a mixture of kind of ministers, and I think we had a doctor, because we did talk about hygiene and puberty and those things. Like I said, it was definitely a separate conversation for the boys and the girls. I know some of the girls brought up, I understand sex is wrong, but what about masturbation? And they were open to, having those conversations with the young girls, which I think is helpful. to have that space to talk about that at church. So I can say that I have seen it done. Now, when I was a youth, I can't remember, but this was in the last, like I said, 10 years or so, where my church hosted this event for young ladies, and I thought it went well.
So you said it was a class on sex for young women. Did it just say don't on the wall and then that's it?
I don't even know if they called it sex per se, but we had sexual topics, what does the Bible say? I don't know if it just said don't have sex now, but it was like, what does the Bible say about sex? What does the Bible say about masturbation? We talked about your body, puberty, growing up, your cycle, all of those pieces. Liking boys, being interested in boys, being attracted, just like we talked about an array of topics that I agree with the producer in the question that sometimes are shied away from in the church. But it was very refreshing to see the head of the church being comfortable with us having that conversation, and then the women leaders also inviting not even just ministers in, but doctors and experts in as well to kind of talk and tackle these topics. So I do think it was good to see.
I remember growing up, I guess this is probably more towards the fornication side of things, but at New Beginning they had this this vow of celibacy ceremony that I did not participate in. And my mama, I remember my mama asking me why, and I just was like, I just don't want to do it. But the real answer was, and I was a virgin at the time, but I was like, I don't know if I'm better keep this promise to God. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I rather just see what happens and hope I come out clean, as opposed to sitting up here at 12 years old, lying to my Lord and Savior, acting like I'm not finna try to squeeze at some point in time in my life. Now, I do remember another instant being at the Full Gospel Conference. This was actually the first one I was old enough to go to. This was in Detroit. And there was a 19-year-old minister there. I think I may have told this story before. And he brought up the conversation about masturbation. You know what I'm saying? And this was my first time even hearing this type of like topic. He was calling it like the lotion bottle and all this other type of stuff and blah, blah, blah. But I remember like as a kid or even growing up, like thinking in hindsight how like I got exposed to masturbation through it being brought up at church. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to me already having the exposure and then now getting just say some type of guidance at church. So this now became just say something that I didn't even realize that existed, but now I'm exposed to it. So now, of course, you go explore. You know what I'm saying? So it's a and then I've been on like a boys retreat, like it was like the Boys to Men, which was like the little boy youth group or whatever. We go on like a retreat or whatever, and I remember for a certain age group, we all took different like little surveys. In certain age group, it was separated. Like the older kids, if you was maybe at least like 14 and up, they had questions about like, were you a virgin? Blah, 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 all this other type of stuff. And we didn't have that on our papers, but I remember even just hearing some of the answers or whatever, just making me aware, like, okay, that was another instance realizing like it's other church kids out here. They've been outside. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if I've ever gotten as many lessons about anything else as I have with the fornication. Like, of course, you hear about not having sex before marriage, definitely more than anything. But I have had different little inklings of just say sexual topics come up in church settings. But definitely not in an educational way, like, hey, make sure you use a condom, or hey, if you start feeling this way, this is a way to, if you wake up, like we always talk about Jesus, if you wake up with morning wood or whatever, if you had a wet dream, or if you see a girl, twerking at a party. Like, we ain't never had none of these conversations. None of them. And I don't know if maybe because they're looked at as inappropriate, you know what I'm saying? And you should just not be thinking about that anyways. And you should just not be in a party anyways. Or My bad. Or, should you, actually have these conversations and inform? But in my closing, going back to the whole masturbation thing, I was informed about masturbation in church as opposed to getting the information after knowing. So that could have been a dangerous situation as well.
Well,
Well,
people
go
in the
ahead.
church have always used our own sexuality against us in a shameful way, which is why so many people feel shameful about it. I think it's completely ludicrous to think that a God-given instinct should be shamed at all. Because I mean, if we're going to go that far, remember there's a part in the Bible in First Corinthians, Paul's letter to the Corinthians said you should stay unmarried if you can. If you can stay unmarried, it's better, because he was unmarried, and he said if you could stay unmarried like me, but if you can't control your fire, then it's better to marry. Which, you could take that to modern times with Catholic priests and all their getting up tos, So it's like, if you can't, it's better if you can't handle this, it's better for you to marry. But that's been corrupted over the years, and it definitely started with the Europeans, but that's just my thing. I mean, the Catholics, they're the original ones of shaming everyone's sexuality. But I mean, to this day, I believe the Catholic Church still believes that any form of contraception is murder. Like, using a condom technically means you're robbing God of his chance to give life, even if it's with your wife. Birth control, same thing, all that. That's where all that leads. That's at least my opinion. That's where all that leads.
Well, I don't know all about that, Terry. I have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it for like 20 years.
My brain's moving a little slow today. But I can't really remember as a youth any like church classes or Bible studies on like sexual topics. I faintly remember some maybe at a overnight conference or something like that, but clearly it didn't stick with me. I will say our church, maybe within the past 10 years, for the young adults, did a Wednesday Bible study series on sexual topics, and it was very good. I think the setting does matter, and the teacher does matter. Like creating that environment where you are comfortable to speak. She presented it in a way that it wasn't like judgmental. It was more informative. And one thing I really liked about her approach to it, she just didn't say don't have sex. She went into the real reasons why. And I mean, not even just, oh, you can get pregnant or you could get an STD, but she was talking about soul ties and what it does mentally, like literally when you're having orgasms or whatever, like the different chemicals that are going on in your brain. And she was talking about, like, honestly, how like men are at their weakest state after the climax, and that's how like how different spirits can come on you when you're physically weak. And talked about masturbation even within marriage, and what are you thinking about when you're doing it? Are you thinking about your wife, or are you thinking about something else? And so it's something that when I finished that class, I think it was like maybe 6 or 8 weeks long. So it was in depth. She also brought in like a psychologist to kind of talk about things and like even like sexual abuse, sexual trauma, because that's something that's not talked about in church, but it happens a lot. There'd be a lot of sex happening at church. Okay, Rudy, exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
But it's something that I left that class wishing that I had gotten it before, like at a younger age, where someone really broke it down and not just said, oh, don't have sex. And something else that I've noticed, and this is not to, judge anybody, but there was once a point at our church where there was a lot of young women that were getting pregnant who were not married. And it's just like, that I do feel like there was some level of, from the older church members, some level of judgment. But I saw that as maybe an opportunity that could have been used, not to point them out, but to actually have a more in-depth conversation about it. Even my sister got pregnant at 21. She wasn't married. And so it's definitely needed. I think my church is much older. So I don't know how that would really work with an older church. But, I think with some of these new younger churches and, they all hip and hop and all whatever, they definitely, I don't know the right word, they definitely could and should incorporate those conversations more often. Because I kind of go back and forth because, Rudy, I didn't even think about it this way, but often I feel like I learned more about sex and sexualization and all the things from people not from the church, like whether it's TV, your friends, magazines, movies, whatever. And by the time I did get some type of information other than don't do it, like I already kind of had formed my own opinions and thoughts about it. But to your point, Rudy, like being exposed to certain things in church, I mean, it could have a negative impact too. But I guess the question is like, is it better coming from getting that biblical standpoint first and then trying not to do it, or, getting it somewhere else and then being told, oh, actually you need to stop, or, oh no, like, I don't know.
I agree with a lot of what she said. The best argument I've ever heard against premarital sex was that imagine you're married and, we've all been in relationships. So imagine you're married and you know that your wife has never been with another man and your wife knows that you've never been with another woman. Wouldn't that alleviate a lot of jealousy, a lot of tension, a lot of insecurity? And I'm like, that's the best argument I've ever heard to that, because as a man who's, now second marriage and have seen a lot of that go down, my sister got pregnant at 20, unmarried, but then felt that pressure that we had grown up with, felt that pressure to get married, even though I told her when they said they were getting married, I flat out told her, don't marry this guy, I said, even though you're pregnant, that's fine. It's whatever, I said, just don't marry this guy. And it was a total disaster. It almost ruined her life, the child's life, still has to this day. And a lot of that pressure that comes from the church is just like, it just comes from that, I feel like that judgmental place of like, well, I didn't do that. And good girls don't do that. So obviously you're not a good girl, kind of a thing. And it's way more on women than it is on men.
It's something else, though, to your point, Terry. I can't remember where I saw it, but there was a situation. I don't know about the guy, but I knew the girl was a virgin when she got married. And transitioning from hearing don't have sex till you're married to now you're married, and the expectation is you
have to have sex. A woman has to please her.
She was really struggling with that because nobody really taught her what to do or how to do it or anything like that. Like she had so much emphasis on don't do it. Well, now she's married, and it was like a point of contention in her marriage at the beginning because it was just so taboo to her. Like she was not used to somebody touching her because she was always told, not to be touched. So that's another thing I think that if, the church is going to be hounding don't have sex before marriage, like, okay, well, when you are married, is there any type of guidance? And like you, Kelly, I haven't been married. I don't know what happens in the couples ministry, if they actually have those conversations. But I would be inclined to think it just kind of depends on the church. I personally probably wouldn't feel comfortable if I had just got married and I was a virgin and like I'm in the couples ministry with people my parents' age who are 65, 66 years old. Like, so what is your sex life like? that might not be it either. I don't know.
And I wonder if it's talked about in like premarital counseling. You know, if that's the topic, expectations, you know, and the man says, right, I want sex this many times, you know, I don't know, you know, I expect it this many times a week or whatever. And a woman as a virgin doesn't know what that entails, what that means. I know when I was in, and I got to think about the story before I tell it. So if I hesitate while I'm talking, it's because I'm trying to figure out what I can say and can't say. But I remember when I was in therapy, my therapist actually, and she wasn't a Christian-based therapist, but she frowned against churches telling young women not to have sex before marriage, because to your point, Janessa, she said because a lot of times in marriages she sees where there's a difficult, like you said, transition to I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, I've been told my whole life my body is a temple, you know, protect my body, you know, don't let people use you, you know, or whatever, that you really don't know the difference between good touch, bad touch, if they all good, if they, you know, you know, but what to do, what can you do, you know, and we all grown, we know that sex is just more than the two parts coming together. You know, and so even exploring in those spaces as well, I know it's difficult. And so I thought it was when my therapist told me that, I was so flabbergasted, like, absolutely, like, no, like, I need to quit her because she is just not coming from, you know, that's how I've been conditioned. And I realized I lied, because I used to go to a whole conference every year called True Love Waits.
I forgot about that. Right, must not.
I didn't remember till Rudy had said something about the purity rings. I was like, oh, I did go to True Love Waits every year. And you know, back when we were in high school, conferences were the ultimate hookup spot. Like, that is where you met. You said, what'd you say, Rudy?
I said absolutely.
Right. Like, conferences, like, we lived for conferences. We get to see people outside of our
from
church.
The other church, right.
It's a whole bunch. Oh, this is the spot.
Absolutely.
And so how ironic that, you know, you have this conference, True Love Waits, where at the end of it, right, you take a pledge of purity and they would give you a ring and all of that. And I just remember so vividly,
and like, they be smashing with the ring on.
At the conference. Right?
At the conference.
Not with the ring on.
True Love Waits till tonight.
At the conference, you know. And so I did this messaging, but in True Love Waits, the purpose of it, of course, was True Love Waits, you know, that you wait to have sex until you get married. And so, and it was, I remember I used to enjoy going to the conference. I don't remember if it was the content or the boys, but I used to enjoy going. But you would, you know, people know what conferences are. It was 2-3 days, and you would go through a variety of workshops and speakers, and, you know, whole group lessons on why it's important to wait till you have sex to get married. And they would give, the Bible says so, and then the soul ties, and, you know, and they would give us a bit of all of that. But again, we 14s, probably, I think it was just for high school. So 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. You know, going through that. So I definitely did get the messaging as a youth. I apologize for the big lie. Hey y'all, sorry to interrupt, but we have a few church announcements. Follow us on Instagram at TheWorstOnesPK. New content coming soon. We also have a TikTok at TheWorstOnesPK. No content yet, but continue to check us out. If you want to, when you listen to our podcast, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Just make sure you type in The Worst Ones Podcast and you'll find us. And when you get there, make sure you like, you comment, you subscribe, and you share. Thank you to our 500,422 followers. We love you so much. Now, back to the show.
Well,
I forgot about that.
That's I mean, I almost feel like that's worse, you know, to make you say give your lip service to the church, knowing in your mind you're like, no, this is never gonna happen. Like Rudy said, you're banging with the purity rings on, you know. Like I remember I was 16. I lost my virginity. You know, there was me and the girl I was seeing and my cousin and the girl he was seeing, and we went in to the sanctuary and prayed for forgiveness for the thing we were about to go do. You know what I mean? Like kind of like preemptive. And I think there's a lack of reality when it comes to the church, and mainly not even just the church or religion or the Bible, mainly the people in the church, because that's who is the ones that are teaching kids this and telling kids this. And there's a lack of reality that I think just kind of shuts off a part of it. You know, like, because I remember being a teenager going, well, you are talking nonsense, and you obviously have no idea what's going on with me right now, the hormones and the curiosity and the, you know, the desire. You obviously have no idea what you're talking about. It couldn't have seemed further away from my reality than what these people were talking about. And the preaching of abstinence only is, you're going to affect maybe 2 to 5% of those kids. And I think it's more of just a personal thing. Like I said before, the best argument I had was, like, if you really want to have a successful marriage, this is going to take a lot of that pressure off, because there won't be any insecurity or jealousy or this or that. However, I definitely feel like, at least from a male perspective, that it could lead to infidelity a lot more often, because, you know, just biologically, males in all, you know, species on the planet are kind of trained instinctually to, you know, go out and populate. Not that there aren't success stories. My niece got married earlier this year, and both of them were virgins. They both waited till marriage. Did I call her a nerd? Absolutely. Did I make fun of them for it in my wedding toast? Absolutely.
Terrible.
But good for them. But I think it's really of an individual basis. I don't think it needs to come from the church. It needs to come from the parent or parents, because those are the people that actually know who they're talking to. Like, they know the person on the other side of this conversation.
So should the church give condoms?
No, did my church give condoms?
Should the church give condoms?
Should the church?
Should youth ministries give condoms?
I think they should make them. I don't think they should freely hand them out, but I think they should make them available in a discreet manner, because I don't know, as women, if you've ever had to buy condoms in your life, but if you're 16, 17 years old and you're a man and you have to walk in and buy condoms, it's humiliating. But it shouldn't be, but it is. I mean, you're going in there, you're basically telling somebody, like, I'm going to get laid. You should be excited about that as a young man, but you're not. It's humiliating. It's like, I would probably attribute it to the first time a girl has to go in and buy tampons for herself, you know? Like, you need them, and it's you know what I mean? It's a good idea to have them, but I bet it's embarrassing. I've never been a teenage girl having to buy tampons, but I bet it's embarrassing the first time you do it.
Yeah, I definitely think that it can come from the church as far as the lessons. I just think the problem is, well, for one, I mean, and there's a responsible way to go about it. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to just necessarily just gather all the children up and just start, you know, talking about, you know, sticking it or whatever the case may be. But definitely, for one, you know, you get the parents' approval, let them know, like, yo, this month, you know, we're gonna cover these type of topics or whatever the case may be. But I also think there has to be a certain level of realness, you know what I'm saying, that has to come from it as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, if the only thing, like, we can read the Bible and find out that how God feels about fornication. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, like my dad is mentioning in one of his sermons before how you know, they'll have kids come up to the altar to try to pray that you know, that devil out of them, that demon out of them, especially if they done, you know, had sex or whatever like that. And he like, but by the time they get done praying, that devil's still there. You know what I'm saying? And that kid can now feel like there's something wrong with them, because, you know, you probably praying this away and it didn't go away. But there's also a difference between just say sinful nature and nature. You know what I'm saying? Like, naturally, us as human beings we're going to desire things that the Bible tells us not to do. But the Bible mentions all these things because God knows we're going to want to do these things. And I think the fact that we try to mask it as just a do not do, as opposed to if you find yourself in these situations, coming from that perspective, I think that's why it's I guess it's not as productive and it's not as often of a conversation in church. Like we just leave it. And even honestly, I didn't even necessarily hear the whole don't have sex before marriage 1,000 times in church. That wasn't like, I don't even know if I ever heard Bishop Morton actually preach that from the pulpit. That was just more or less like, you hear just throughout church, whether it be in a Bible study or a Sunday school or a retreat or whatever the case may be, or an actual ceremony that's covering it. But even that wasn't like just hammered on. And then even like I never had like a birds and the bees talk, with my parents and nothing like that, or even at church. But the conversation that I've definitely had with my mom, or that she had with me rather, was I would prefer for you to wait until you're married. But if you have to, have sex and you just can't wait, you need to make sure that you use a condom. This is a conversation she had with me as a teenager. I definitely had already lost my virginity by the time this conversation happened. I'm not sure if she knew that, but the point is that was the conversation she had. So even going back to what you said, Kelly, about or asked, should the church provide, condoms? I whether somebody said yes or no, I can see both sides, because like if you are providing the condoms, then it does seem a little encouraging, you know what I'm saying? Like, hey, don't waste your money, you know what I'm saying? We got we got rubbers on deck, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you don't want kids to go out there and do something that changes their whole life all because they didn't have a Jimmy on them. So
it sounds like the same thing your mom said, which is, yeah, I don't want you to do this, but if you're gonna do it, be safe. It's like I don't want you to be out on the road driving, but if you're gonna be driving, wear your seatbelt.
Yeah, but coming from your mom and coming from the church is still two different things. Like my mom,
I agree.
My mom is saying that from a mother's perspective, you know what I'm saying, as opposed to like the church that is specifically preaching against premarital sex and then providing condoms. Like what? That's why I said I see both sides. Like if somebody was like, "Yeah, I feel like they should," I see where you're coming from. But if somebody was like, "Nah, man, I feel like they shouldn't do that because X, Y, B, Z," I understand that as well. Like it's a very thin line to kind of teeter, because you don't, just like, once again, going back to the whole masturbation thing with me, I didn't know anything about masturbation until they had that conversation in the little break-off class at the Full Gospel Conference. And I'm not saying it was that dude's fault, because I was in the room with at least 100 other people, and I seemed like I might have been the only person who was unaware, because everybody else reacted. I'm saying at least it seemed. I didn't see everybody, but majority of the audience definitely erupted and was laughing, and they was giving the reaction that teenage boys or preteen boys would give in this conversation. Meanwhile, I'm like, ooh, what's that? You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's a catch-22. Like, it is a little dangerous. I definitely think at a certain age, like especially by the time kids get 15, 16, that the conversations should probably definitely start happening, because the hormones are definitely kicking. I think when they maybe like 12, 11, 13, it may be case by case. Like maybe you can't just present it to everybody, because some people may not be as advanced as others. But if you're definitely made aware that a kid is, already active, I think it's okay for somebody to step in. I don't know who it should be per se, but for somebody to step in, and even maybe teaching the parents, like when you got the couples ministry and all this other type of stuff, but what about the ministry that's even talking to the parents about how to deal with their kids when it comes down to sex, or how should you just whatever the case may be. Like I don't think there's really like a system in place when it comes down to sex outside of put the little ring on to promise that you're not going to do it.
Well, that's the best idea you've had in the world. As a church, stop talking to the kids about sexuality. Start talking to the parents about how they should maybe address sexuality with their kids, because it shouldn't come from anybody else. Like the medical side of it should come from programs in school, just the medical side of it, how reproduction works, and because not every parent's going to be equipped for that. So either the schools need to equip the parents for the medical side and leave the spiritual side to the church to equip the parents. I think that's the best case scenario. However, I will say this: no good, in my opinion, no good has ever come from a church getting involved in anyone's sexuality, whether it be about sex before marriage, whether it be about homosexuality, whether it be about any of these things. No good has come from it, but a lot of bad has objectively come from it. Objectively, everything from girls feeling like, their sexuality is their whole purpose, to pray the gay away, resulting in so many suicides, and just let the church go spiritually and stay out of sexuality. There's no reason for you to be there.
So I agree with you, Rudy. I've never thought about that approach of having classes or some type of teaching opportunity for the parents to learn how to speak to their kids, because I know it's kind of like an awkward conversation. And my parents never gave me a birds and the bees conversation. I heard it from the pulpit and I heard it from our sex ed classes. And it was just very awkward. And so I remember a time we had this class in middle school, it was a sex ed class, and they wanted everybody to bring in condoms. And of course I had to ask my parents, because how in middle school, how you supposed to
how do you do that?
And so most of the kids' parents bought them a box of condoms, or like the 3-pack or something like that. I'm not going to tell y'all how I got the condoms. It was very embarrassing, but at the end of it, they let us take home, they had all these condoms, they let you take them home. So I grabbed a whole bunch and I hid them in my bookshelf because I was so scared. I didn't have that type of relationship with my parents to be like, look what I got, coming home from school. So I hid them. I didn't have any anticipation. I wasn't planning on using them, but I just grabbed a bunch of them. And one day my mom was looking for a book, because I actually shared the bookshelf with my dad's old MBA books and his theological books on one side, and then it's my books, and she was trying to find something. And so she found one, and then she started going through them, and she collected all of them. And of course it was a whole conversation, and it was awkward, and it's thinking about if I had my own kids, how would I do things differently? And one thing that kind of makes me nervous, and I didn't get it as a kid, but now that I'm older, I kind of do. I feel like the world has changed so much since when we were kids. When you were talking about, 11, 12, they might not be ready, but unfortunately, these kids are getting it. These kids have phones these days. 10-year-olds have iPhones, they got TikTok and whatever else social media.
TikTok, they got porn. They got porn on demand.
Whatever else you can get your hands on. And I think the church has kind of misstepped, one, by not really addressing it to the first place, but the same narrative and the same talking points and the same delivery has been given from generation to generation, and it hasn't really changed with the generation. And so I definitely think there needs to be somebody of adultness needs to be educated or informed on how to talk to parents, how to talk to kids, where they're at, given what's going on in the world. I know, our teenagers, we was twerking at parties or whatever, but now, and maybe they was doing this in y'all school. They wasn't doing that in my school, but now kids are giving head in the bathroom at the school, on the school bus, they're just doing a lot more things a lot sooner, being exposed in ways that we just never were. And if you're not equipped to deal with it, then the world is really gonna get their minds before, the church, or even sexual education class in school. By that time, it'll be too late. Kids are developing faster these days. Younger kids are getting pregnant earlier these days. It's a whole trickle down effect. So yeah, I really do like your idea about helping to educate the educators, i.e. parents, or I don't know, the counselors or ministry leaders or whoever.
I think Janessa's really striking on something here, because like she said, it's every generation is going to develop faster than the generation before them. So say when I was, when I was around that age where that started to come into question, I'm dealing with my parents and I'm dealing with the people in church, and they're all well older than me. And it's like, well, no, we just didn't talk about that when I was a kid. You figured it out on your own as you went along. So now they're trying to deal with it, and they're doing the best they can, but they're just ill-equipped. And now you have these kids, like you said, with a phone in their pocket, and that's the most dangerous thing, because now you've got access to porn, and not just porn, but the craziest things that the internet community can come up with, which I don't know if you've been on the internet, but there's some pretty wild stuff out there. And I'm not just talking about pornography. I'm talking about just theories and explanations and stuff that send kids way down the wrong path. And the only thing that I can think that comes to mind is I found an old penthouse when I was about 13, right? And this is a point where my mom's a single mom. I found an old penthouse. Now, I don't know if you know anything about the 90s, but we didn't have the internet. You know what I mean? And pornography was very, very far away from every teenage boy. So if you found something like that, you're holding a bar of gold, And I hid it in my room, and then my mom found it, I'm assuming during a snooping session. And God bless her. Do you know what she did? She took it. She thought about it. She came to me the next day and she goes, look, I don't want you looking at this kind of stuff. She's like, if you're at this point, I will get you a subscription to Playboy, because in her mind, it was Playboy is tasteful, and Penthouse and Hustler and all these things that are showing women splayed and all that. To her, that was like not the way she wanted me to see women, So she took a very rational approach and was like, if you want me to get you a subscription to Playboy, I will do that. It's not expensive. It'll come to the house. It comes all discreet. You don't have to be embarrassed. Now, forget it. I said no because I was totally embarrassed. I'm talking to my mother, about this kind of stuff, which is already embarrassing enough. If she was really cool, she would have just got the subscription and let it come to the house.
You were going to say no.
No, but I was so
going to say no.
Like,
right.
Who said yes to that? Like,
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mom, give me some titties.
Your mom knew that you were going to say no. Like you said, your mom was smart enough to know when I asked him this, he's going to say no.
I would love to think that is the case, but I don't think it is. I think she looked at that magazine and she saw those women all splayed out and stretched open and all this, and she's like, this is not what I want him to be seeing. I think she was being legit.
I think she would have preferred you to look at Playboy than Pinup or whatever it's called. Penthouse. But I also think at however old you were, 13, 14, 15 years old, that 13. That she knew that when I approach my son about this, he's going to be embarrassed, it's going to be awkward for him, and he's going to say no. I just feel like your mother knew that. Had you said yes, I think she may have gone through with it and done it, but I think she probably also knew that he's going to say, he's going to be embarrassed.
I see where you're coming from, and I would love for that to be the case, but I remember that conversation very vividly, and I don't think that was the case at all. I would love to give her that credit, but I don't think that's the case.
You don't think she knew her son enough to know that she thought you were just gonna stand as a man and be like, yeah, okay, thank you, Mom, I'll take Playboy.
No. I think the main message of it was, because that wasn't the whole conversation. Like, it was a whole it's a whole conversation about that. No, I think it was more important to her for me to show a certain respect for women, even when it came to that thing. I think that was the more important part for her was, you know, like, I know you feel this way and I know you have these urges and all this, and I understand that, but even because of all this, you still have to show a certain amount of reverence and respect for the women you're looking at. That's definitely what I think.
Right. And I love that. I remember, and it may be my own personal experience, I kind of like you, Rudy. I had the conversation with my mom. I would prefer you not to have sex, but if you did, please let me know. So that we can go birth control, we can go condoms route, we can go whatever. And I think my mom knew me well enough to know that, like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable, this is awkward, I don't want to talk about it, you know. But she was also like, you know, I understand what the church says, I understand how your father feels. My mom is definitely the realer of the two, and anybody that who knows my mom know that she can be as real as they come. But that was her messaging to me. I did get the birds and the bees, you know, and hers was like, hey, if this is what you decide to do, I don't want you to, but if this is what you decide to do, this is how I want you to do it. And I was like, ill no. Always have cooties.
Now, fast forward, by the way, when I was like 17 and my girlfriend was 16. Now, her family was as secular as it gets, right? No church, no this, no that. Her father had just gotten out of like 10 years in prison. But the day he walked in on her, let's say, giving me a hug with her mouth, he took her that totally happened to me, and I was terrified because this dude got out of prison like 10 months ago. But the next day he took her and got her birth control, and he said, I know what you're doing, I know you're going to do this, and I don't want you to ruin your life. And she didn't, and that's what happened. And it was, and not only that, it brought us all together a little bit, kind of. Because then I didn't feel bad or awkward or anything like that.
Not having sex with his daughter anymore? That's funny.
Well, we weren't up to that yet, but he was getting ahead of the game. You know what I mean? Like, but he was getting ahead of the game.
It's interesting you say that, because my experience is kind of the opposite. I had really bad cycles growing up, like where I had to go to the hospital and get morphine drips, like all the time. I missed school. And of course my dad was always the one who ended up taking me to the hospital. It was never my mom. And so when the doctor came in one time, he was like, if we put her on birth control pills, it would really help her out a lot. And my dad was like, absolutely not. We're not trying to encourage sex or anything like that, but it really wasn't even about the sex.
It was about
about trying to make me like live a better quality life. And so my dad was like, what else y'all got? And they were like,
drink some cranberry juice or something, I don't know.
It was like, well, we can give her 800 milligram ibuprofen. And I will say my dad is the best dad, because when I would get cramps so bad, I would get them in my back. He would like get the hand massage thing, and he would do it for me. So I guess that was his compromise, since I wasn't going to be put on. However, as soon as I was 18 and got on Spelman's campus, and you have to get like your physicals and whatever, my mom was like, yeah, it's time, because I was just in so much pain, and like I was just doing so much. And I think that part is not also talked about in church. There's such a focus on don't have sex. And even when we were saying, should the church give out condoms, should the youth be on birth control even though they're not having sex? And there's of course arguments about the side effects of what birth control does to women and the hormones, whatever. But that's another thing I didn't really think about, Terry, until you were talking about how her dad immediately went and got her birth control. My dad was the opposite. He was very adamant, like anything else y'all have but birth control, because
even you needed it for a medical reason.
But he felt like it was just like a gateway to saying, oh, it's okay. I mean, yeah, you doing this for this medical procedure, but you also got this benefit of being
Right.
95% protected from used
Why?
correctly.
Why wouldn't he just lie to you, get you the pills, and just tell you they were vitamins or something? You know what I mean? Be like, these are going to help. These are just vitamins. And just lie to you and tell you, and not tell you it's birth control.
Lying is also a sin. He like, you gonna
lying, denying
be a
medical
virgin
care
with cramps. All right.
Yeah.
He's not.
No, you're going to suffer and miss school and go to the hospital and all this. It's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. But I get where you're coming from, because my dad would have probably done the same thing at that time. Now, luckily, things have changed by the time my sister reached that level. But if he was the same guy he was when I was like 8 or 9, absolutely. I mean, this is the guy that made her like burn her New Kids on the Block albums, like, and mom couldn't wear makeup or pants, like. So I see it both ways, but still, when you get to the point where you're like, no, you suffer with your shame, that's what you get for eating the apple.
I remember my mom took Reese's Cisco CD. She was so hurt. She was boo-hoo crying. She was too young. All right.
Well, maybe if she hadn't been listening to that devil's music, she wouldn't have had to.
Janessa, do you have jewels?
Mm-mm.
All righty.
Get rest. Go to sleep.
Headed there now.
Stay on them drugs.
At Princess Kells 51, you can find me.
You can find her. You ain't getting anywhere.
Right. Period. You can find me.
She didn't lie. She said you can find me.
You can find me.
Well, you can find me at JRihanna __. We have fun over there when I'm not tired.
You're not tired. You hurt. I feel.
I am.
At Terry Wing Comedy on all social media platforms. And you can get the book, as always, on Amazon. It's Unclaimed Ashes. You'll know when you see it. You'll know when you see it.
I'm gonna read a chapter tonight.
Shout out to at Risa G _G. She got on me for not having an at last time. So our producer, follow her at RHESA _G. Yeah, see what I don't know what does Reese post about? Lil Reese, stuff like that.
Untraditional or non-traditional.
I don't know if she's still doing that.
I ain't seen that woman. She posted about her adventures in LA.
She posted about who?
Her adventures in LA. She always out in the streets. She loves a good adventure, good experience,
hiking and stuff.
And just I think encapsulated, just a little tag on this whole episode is just remember, parents, either you can teach your kids the truth about sex or the world will. Be one of you.
I did like to educate the educators. I may steal that for my for school. So if y'all see that blow up and get big, no, I stole it from here.
Well, you stole it from me specifically, and I want my check. Okay.
And I'm not giving anyone anything.
For educate.
Well, definitely, because my high school experience with sex ed or middle school. I'm sorry, it was in middle school.
I gotta see I'm going to go to the health teachers and see when they talk about sex.
Let's put it this way: they separated the boys and the girls.
As they should.
The first vagina I ever saw in my life was covered in herpes, like covered in it. Took a while to get over that.
We had to watch The Birth of Life, like that movie.
We watched that too. Yeah, we watched that too.
And my first sex ed class was in 4th grade.
I think mine was
4th grade. Good Lord. Mine was 2 years later, and I'm younger. I'm older than you.
Yes, I think mine was 5th grade.
That's too young.
The county door.
6th grade at minimum. 6th grade at minimum.
And then we had to do like the sugar baby experiment in the egg, where you have to carry around like a bag of sugar like it was a baby for like 6 weeks.
I don't remember if I had to do that. My memory's not that good though. I don't remember if I had to do that or not.
It was an egg, and it was 2 days for us. Yeah.
Did I have to do that? Let me ask Risa.
I didn't do any of that, nor did I have a sex ed class. So shout out to me for figuring it out on my own. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So
that says a lot now. I'm playing.
That's why you're single. What? We going out on a burn. Get the ointment.
If that was a burn, you need to quit your comedy career. All right, we the worst ones. We out.
Top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world.